Question number 2, what's an insight or fact about Bitcoin that you wish everyone understood? Welcome to the Business Bitcoinization Show, the show dedicated to helping you enrich your life and grow your business with Bitcoin, the hardest money on planet Earth. I'm your host, Josh Friedeman, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a supercut of various guest answers to some of the initial 5 questions. This is something that a number of listeners have asked of me in the past, and because this summer is particularly busy for me, I figured these would be some great episodes to have in the queue for weeks where I didn't have the time to edit and prepare a full episode. In June, I'll be in Spain for 2 weeks. I'll also be moving. And then July, I'll be doing some camping and I'll be at the Bitcoin conference, which, by the way, if you're going to be there, let me know. It'd be great to connect, as well as a couple other things here and there. So because of that, I decided to finally take a little bit of time and create some of these supercuts. I may actually end up regretting this because it might end up being more work than editing just a normal episode, but I won't know until I get to doing the work. And I'm actually recording this before creating the supercuts. Anyway, I hope you'll enjoy these and I hope you'll share some feedback with me about your thoughts here. Now that there's over 110 episodes of the podcast, there are plenty of opportunities to do this multiple times over, but it also may be one of those things that looks really good on paper, but doesn't end up being as interesting as I and other people might have thought. Either way, thanks for listening today, and we're going to get to that supercut right after this. Business owners, unlock the benefits Bitcoin has to offer your business with the Bitcoin for Business Quick Start Guide. This 27-page guide highlights the 6 ways you can grow your business with Bitcoin. Check it out in the show notes. What's an insight or fact about Bitcoin that you wish everyone understood?
Yeah, I think that for me, I was a little bit scared of it because I just didn't understand. And I thought going in, if, we're always just as human beings, a little bit fearful of asking dumb questions. And so I think people who want to get into Bitcoin are going to find a community of people, like I just mentioned, that are just very willing to and excited to be teachers. My grandpa always used to tell me there are times to be the teacher and times to be the student. And some of us, especially who are, older, have a tough time being students sometimes. But, man, the Bitcoin community is incredible at answering questions and just being willing to educate. So it is not nearly as scary as one would think it is, kind of looking from the outside in.
That it's the single biggest middle finger you can give to everything in the world that you do not like, whether that is the government, whether that is taxation, whether that is not having permissionless money, the self-sovereignty aspect of your own finances, anti-Federal Reserve and inflation. It is the ultimate middle finger of voting with your dollars and taking full financial control over your life.
I wish everyone just understood money, because honestly, that's one of the biggest precursors, generally speaking, for someone to understand Bitcoin. You first have to ask, what is money? And if you don't know what money is, it's going to be a little more difficult at the current time we're in to really grok Bitcoin and understand Bitcoin. Fortunately, with a lot of these more recent developments of, say, like we talked about Lightning Network and the more mainstream it's gotten as well, whether due to Lightning Network or just simply more and more people talking about it, people are going to be able to come into Bitcoin other than just that money aspect or other just an investment aspect. It's able to kind of take root in whether it's like beef, with the beef initiative, farming and ranching, whether it's, more tech stuff or local commerce, or it is like inflation or it's taking root in other countries. So, I wish people understood money, but fortunately, Bitcoin is taking root in all aspects of everything money touches. So it's no longer a precursor anymore.
That Bitcoin is money without being money. That Bitcoin is the best money ever created by man, and that if you let go of your ideas of what money should be and how it should be controlled, it is the greatest thing since sliced bread and toasters. Anybody who's had the experience of moving money in a bank account or receiving money in a bank account, internationally or inside of a nation, knows how frustrating and horrible that experience is. Once you move money with Bitcoin, you'll never look back, never go back to the old way of using these financial tools. All of the applications by banks and people like Monzo, with these sort of neobanks, something they call in the UK, their user experience is totally inferior compared to Bitcoin. Not only that, Bitcoin is international out of the box, and you get the same utility, the same ease of use where you're moving any amount of money anywhere in the world. Paying by credit card online is a terrible experience, but with Bitcoin, it's not. All you do is flash a QR code to the user, they pay to the QR code, and it's done in seconds. So Bitcoin represents a profound improvement on the user experience of spending money. And if I could convey this to people, that you don't have to suffer any longer, that's what I would convey to them. There's a better way of doing this kind of thing, and that way is Bitcoin.
Asymmetric upside. Bitcoin has huge upside if it does what a lot of Bitcoiners think it can and replaces gold, demonetizes debt, and replaces a lot of the store value functions of long-term debt, such as U.S. Treasuries, replaces real estate. The upside is huge. And while we can't say for certain that Bitcoin will 100.000% succeed, and it has significant downside as we've seen in the price volatility recently, because of the massive asymmetric upside, it's an incredible asset. I think it's by far the best asset out there, risk adjusted, and almost all my personal net worth is in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think if I had to boil this one down, it would be the fact that proof of work is the most efficient method we have for doing something like Bitcoin. I think it would prevent people from going down these false narratives of the efficiency gains of proof of stake, or even things like why you should use a blockchain and what a blockchain is actually useful for. Or not. I think if people understood that more, it would help out a lot of the broader narrative and a lot of the FUD we deal with every day when it comes to politicians and things like that.
Man, I wish everyone understood what money is. I mean, I think we use it every day, but I think if you were to ask, the average person, they wouldn't be able to tell you the properties of money, and kind of, why we have it. And so what is money, and just getting an understanding of that, like the, first principles, the basics. I think if everyone understood that, it would make a lot more sense as to why Bitcoin is so great and why we need it.
I think it's the unconfiscatableness, those 12 words or 24 words or 18 words or whatever you're securing your personal, Bitcoin with. This is really kind of, important right now today, as we're seeing markets melt down with people's funds are locked up in long-term lockups and they can't get their money out, or they can't get money in to handle a liquidation. They're being margin called. Well, that's not your money. That's someone else's money. That's someone else's debt. Mm-hmm. When you've got your 12 or 24 words and you've got your Bitcoin, that's your Bitcoin. Nobody can take it away from you.
I think the way demand drives price and how little adoption there already is. So people assume that if somebody owns any Bitcoin, they're sort of maxed out on Bitcoin. And that's not true. Now, people like me, that may be true. I own more Bitcoin than stocks, bonds, and US dollar cash combined. But that's not for the average person. The average person, when they do surveys to find out who owns Bitcoin, the average person may own like $200. So they run a survey and they say, well, 10% of the populace has adopted Bitcoin. And it's like, no, in that 10%, most of them have thousands of dollars in US dollars and a couple $100 a Bitcoin. Like, that 10% is barely even started adopting Bitcoin. There's a very small, maybe 1/10 of 1% that's in my camp, which has as much Bitcoin as you can reasonably own without being irresponsible, including much more lopsided Bitcoin versus any US dollar denominated assets.
I wish that more people, and this isn't necessarily just about Bitcoin itself, it plays a major role, but understood the difference between volatility and risk. See, Bitcoin clearly, as we're experiencing right now in June of 2022, Bitcoin is being outrageously volatile with its price compared to US dollars. However, risk does not equal volatility. Risk is ultimately whether or not you're able to achieve a goal or do the thing that you set out to do. Volatility can interfere and interrupt and bring in risk, but they're not equivalent. In my opinion, I think Bitcoin on a daily basis is becoming a less risky asset, assuming you're holding it for the proper period of time and it's in the proper percentage of your portfolio allocation. Meet Linkster, your premier Bitcoin-focused advisor. Linkster caters to businesses, institutions, family offices, and high-net-worth individuals. They merge your unique financial goals and needs with Linkster's Bitcoin expertise to craft your own sustainable plan to preserve and grow the value of your hard-earned profits and retained earnings. At Linkster, it's not just advice, it's tailored execution. Connect directly with the founder by visiting linkster.com. That's LYNCSTER.com. Linkster. Secure your future with Bitcoin. Today's episode of Business Bitcoinization is proudly brought to you by Velis Commerce, where the future of business technology meets Bitcoin. As we journey through the era of Bitcoin and its transformational impact on businesses, there's one name that stands out: Velis Commerce. Whether you're looking to build a cutting-edge website, a seamless mobile app, or custom software, Velis is your go-to team. They've been diving deep into the world of Bitcoin since 2014, making them one of the most experienced groups for integrating Bitcoin and Lightning payments into a variety of digital platforms. But here's what truly sets them apart. Velis Commerce doesn't just build. They bring a wealth of knowledge to ensure your project's success from day one. Their team understands the nuances of Bitcoin, ensuring that your business stays ahead of the curve. And for all business Bitcoinization listeners out there, Velis Commerce is offering a free consultation to kickstart your project the right way. So if you're ready to future-proof your business in the coming age of hyper-Bitcoinization, head over to veliscommerce.com or reach out on Twitter at veliscommerce. Let's make sure your business thrives in the Bitcoin era. So the next question is what's an insight or fact about Bitcoin that you wish that everyone understood?
Ooh, there's so many. Maybe even just simply that you don't need. What's Bitcoin at today? US dollar value $21,000, somewhere around there. That you don't need $21,000 to purchase Bitcoin, and that it's not a scam. People really need to take that word and that association away from Bitcoin. The quicker that happens, the better as well.
Nice. I would say I'm going to go a little bit off the radar here and tailor it more towards maxis, just because the Bitcoin maxis are a lot of the times making the arguments that will eventually trickle down into the normie world. I wish that individuals knew not about Bitcoin, but about what we're trying to do with Bitcoin. The community and the network is who we're actually fighting, and what the history of just the monetary system in general is, and how essentially a distributed ledger technology overtook the US dollar. And from there, that's what we're fighting, rather than fighting the US dollar or the Fed. I think it's always interesting that Bitcoiners will be so distrustful of everything coming out of the government, but they'll believe the one thing that the government says about who controls the global reserve asset. So I wish if we could do just that little bit more, just a little bit more research into the global monetary network, we could see who we're actually fighting. And it's also a bit of hopium that, if a distributed ledger technology has already won, one that is more open source and that is more open and permissionless is going to win out again, because it's just simply more efficient.
For me, I think it's all about how it lowers your time preference and just makes you a better person all around. And it just has these profound effects on every aspect of your life. Your health, your education, your relationships. It just changes you fundamentally as a human being. So putting aside, the fix the money, fix the world aspect of it, I think it's kind of like it wants you to fix yourself. And you have this like much lower time preference about everything. And you start to have, these hope for the future and these grander visions, and you want to become like a healthier person, more educated person, a better person. You start to shape your relationships around like lower time preference. And I think that's something that, if people knew that at the start and didn't concentrate so much on the charting and the money, like that would be an awesome intro for people.
Wow. I think understanding how it's not possible to change its rules is really, really interesting. That is not immediately obvious at all when you talk about Bitcoin, because there's all this stuff about Bitcoin is limited in the supply and Bitcoin is, secure and all this other stuff. Okay. But there's nothing that really explains, like in a one sentence format, why it's true that it's limited in supply. Why can't the supply be just inflated? Which is, the question that every newbie to Bitcoin is like, well, why can't they just copy it? Like, how do you know that they're not going to make more of them? And that's I think is a very interesting topic to explore, because a lot of people don't realize that there is no they. There's not like they can make more Bitcoin. It's the decentralized consensus that makes sure that there's no Bitcoin created beyond the what's programmed, and that is not trivial and not obvious.
Yeah,
I think really that you just don't have to understand everything all at once. You don't have to get all of Bitcoin. You can get one portion of it, starting to buy a little bit, diving down the rabbit hole. I think anyone who's been in it for a while realizes that, like, hey, I thought I understood it at this point. I didn't. Like, you keep on going further and further, understanding it, but you don't have to get it all at once in order to buy a little bit and learn about it. I think that's what intimidates a lot of people, of like, hey, I don't understand this thing, I'm not going to worry about it. If they realize, hey, I could just learn a little bit of, hey, there's a 21 million hard cap, that's one thing I know, and kind of go from there.
The biggest thing that I wish everybody understood was just the fact that it is not an infinite thing. And how important that is to, I think, just financial responsibility as a country and as a world, really, as a world economy.
The fact that, maybe it's opinion, but, as you experience it for yourself, it's easy. I think Bitcoin is this big, complicated subject that I think even Bitcoiners will approach it with people in a very complicated way that really doesn't serve them, and so I think the tools for people to onboard, the tools for people to use Bitcoin to transact, it's very simple. It doesn't involve new skills. It's downloading an app, scanning a QR code, scanning another QR code. So these are things that we've all become largely accustomed to, and I think it's time that people advocating for Bitcoin are focused on showing those easy, simple use cases, because it's very, very simple.
Decentralization. It's the biggest pain point in everybody's life, and nobody understands how to visualize that or how to break it down and separate a lot of their actions, their intentionalities, and a lot of their consumption models to decrease the centralized control. And one thing that Bitcoin is, it's decentralized, it's spread out, it's a hive, it's a spider web, it's water coming down a mountain to where you can't stop it. And if you can understand decentralization when it comes to technology, you understand that, the gatekeepers, that's what people are scared about, as far as, hey, we can't control this thing. How do we shut this off? We don't know how to shut this off because, the censorship that we have. So I always look at Bitcoin it's a decentralized mindset that you need to acquire first. Once you grasp that, then you're able to kind of look at more of the protocol itself, the network itself, and you understand how it's operating, how being decentralized, how it validates and how it verifies itself in TikTok next blog.
Yeah, so I've got two, a philosophical one and a technical one. So the philosophical fact is that just because buying and holding Bitcoin speculative by nature, or simply putting your hopes into Bitcoin without even buying necessarily is speculative by nature, because you're speculating that this will be somewhere that it's not today, and it'll be doing things that it's not doing today. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, and most importantly, it doesn't mean that it's sinful. If you're dissatisfied with the system, and that applies to a large swath of people, and probably the overwhelming majority of people, and I mean that both locally, nationally as well as internationally, then this is a legitimate means to correct it, or at least ameliorate it. It doesn't have to be the best solution. It doesn't mean that it is. It might not be. It's just the most functional one. And then the technical point is that your Bitcoins don't actually exist anywhere physically. They're not in your wallet. What's in your wallet is the tool required to authorize, or as I like to say, sort of flex or express ownership over your funds. And what you've really got in your wallet is a digital pen that can produce signatures. And just like physical checks, these transactions are invalid unless signed. So the signature is what proves that this is true, and you authorize these movement of funds.
So talk to me a little bit more about the digital pen side of things. Is that something that you've developed? Where did you get that idea? And also, would you recommend people start talking about private keys in those terms, like in metaphors that people more clearly understand?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. I mean, even that's a little bit tough because, we're talking about cryptography concepts. These aren't even Bitcoin concepts. These are just public private key cryptography concepts. And I think that's part of, dare I say, problem with Bitcoin and the space generally, is that this was built by low level, protocol engineers, and that sort of like product layer hasn't really been built out, or hasn't been built out yet. And so you have end users that don't understand these technical concepts being exposed to vocabulary that's very, very technical, and it's true in a literal sense, but it's not exactly true at the operational sort of UX sense. Yeah, I think it would be helpful people start talking about private keys though.
And then did you come up with that metaphor, or maybe where did you get that idea or insight?
Yeah, I did. I think this was while I was working at Fidelity. I was honestly having a hard time trying to explain what a Bitcoin transaction is and how it works. And I was trying to explain this to the more gray hairs in the company, and I just couldn't figure out an analogy. And when I thought about it with respect to signatures, that's when it kind of clicked. I mean, as opposed to account-based models where there's debits and credits, Bitcoin has a UTXO model, and that's very sort of unintuitive. Normally when you're spending funds from one account, and that gets debited from that account. And, you see the subtraction. It's very simple and it's very clear. But with Bitcoin, you're talking about UTXO models. You're effectively destroying Bitcoins every time you spend them. And a UTXO is an unspent transaction output. But again, that's not a very intuitive thing. So I like to think of it more like claims. Like when you say you own Bitcoin, you technically have the authority to move those funds. You don't have those coins sitting somewhere. They don't necessarily have your name on them in your wallet. What you have are what we call private keys that can generate signatures that verify the claim on these funds. So if I have a UTXO that says, okay, Sam can spend these 2 Bitcoin, what's required is Sam's signature for those Bitcoins to be spent. And what I do is I consume that sort of claim, and I consume it in its entirety, and I create a whole new claim. And that's a very destructive and violent thing that's happening. And that's why it's very dangerous to, spending Bitcoin is, I guess, dangerous, because if you, demarcate the incorrect address, you've consumed this state of ownership that you currently have into this new state. However, the person that can spend this new state doesn't exist because you put the wrong address, for example. And so that's why it's so consequential. And that's why self-custody is, quite a technical thing that, should be learned before you really engage in it.
Yeah, I wish everybody understood what fiat was. That's the real insider effect.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that I've heard people say this before, and I will say that it was to some degree true for me, that to understand Bitcoin, you have to really understand the dollar and other fiat systems first. It's essentially, if you don't understand the problem, you're not going to see Bitcoin as the solution. You're probably just going to see it as some crazy investment like a lot of people do. So to understand what Bitcoin is, understanding fiat first is so important. I think you're the first person maybe who has said it in those terms, but I think that's very insightful.
I think for folks in the U.S. and developed countries, they don't realize how many people have either fled for conflict or looked for a better life in places like the U.S. and Europe, et cetera, and how many of those people still need to support things back home. They want to send humanitarian efforts. They want to send, they want to pay for their kids' schools. They want to do all these things that right now are very hard for them to do with traditional money systems, especially in developing countries. So there is a huge amount of need for Lightning and Bitcoin around the world. We as Americans might not see it yet. So I think more people, Bitcoin, whatever. So I know we're solving real world problems here that are going to help, hundreds of millions of people in developing countries and beyond. So I think a little more study into how much that, helps the world and opens up a new era of global commerce is necessary.
You just got to know what, basically the fiat system and how evilly, disgustingly corrupt and horrible it is for humanity, and how, really what money is, to really learn what money is, and then realizing what, a cap supply of incorruptible, decentralized money and what that could really do for not only you and your business, but for the world and humanity in general. And then, really learning what money is. And because it's the most shocking thing is, it's like we all use it, we all work for it, we all dream about it. Nobody really can tell you what money is. And it's just crucial to understand what it really is.
Well, friends, it's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Business Bitcoinization Show. Once again, I'd love your feedback on this format. If you want to see more of it, let me know. And of course, if you want to see less, I want to know that as well. As always, keep building, keep growing, and until next time, keep living and leading well. If you're a regular listener of the podcast, thank you. If you want to take a further step in your support for the show, you can help us grow by listening on Fountain, a value-for-value podcast app on iOS or Android. If you hear something you like that you disagree with or anything else, you can share it by sending some sats and adding a comment with your thoughts. Some of you have already done this, and I appreciate it. I'm going to begin reading your boosts on upcoming episodes, so if you have some insight or value to add, let the people know. Getting started with Fountain is easy. You can add Bitcoin to your Fountain wallet by using your fiat accounts or any Lightning wallet. And one of my favorite features is that once you're using the app, you can earn sats just by listening on Fountain. Check out the link in the show notes to get started with Fountain today.